So please welcome Katie Bell.
Hey everybody, let me just get this up. Cool. Thanks everybody for coming. What's been really fun this week is making my show next to Sarah's paintings. So Sarah's paintings were here when I arrived last week, and I had looked her up before I got here, and the scale was really different than I saw them digitally, so scale is always strange when you're looking at something on your phone. And when I came to the gallery, I was so kind of shocked by the scale of them, the intimacy of them. And then realizing like I had this huge truck and I was just about to like load in things that I needed 5 people to help me with. And the process all week of building my installation and then having the opportunity to take breaks and to go look at Sarah's paintings was really lovely. And as you'll see, that listening to her talk prior to mine, there's so many amazing overlaps where we end up in a really different place. But you'll see a lot of our source imagery and kind of, I think where our head is at is coming from a really same place in a way, kind of like similar maybe way of thinking about the landscape and kind of being inspired by materials. So thank you, John and Rebecca, for pairing us. It's a really nice pairing. I just wanted to show you a little bit of my work prior to this show. My work is mainly pretty installational, site-specific, where I'm going to location and I'm making something on site. My background is totally in painting, and so I'm always thinking about sculptural objects kind of through a painting lens. So this was the show that I had just prior to the exhibition upstairs. And so this is kind of really where my head was at when I came in to thinking about the show here. And some things I've been thinking about with the work are almost like a painting space that acts as a stage space, where the materials act as actors that are kind of in this place of a freeze frame where they're kind of waiting for the next line. Maybe they forgot their line. They're in groupings that feel like they're in a conversation, but they're still in this almost sense of freeze frame, like the next thing hasn't happened yet, or maybe the thing just happened and everyone's waiting. It's this kind of waiting around with kind of small conversations. And a lot of that interest for me came through making paintings and kind of the stillness of paintings and the stillness of abstraction. A lot of the things I was thinking about for the show here at Hall Walls and then also for the show, which was at Illinois State, I've been thinking a lot about Russian constructivist theater. And the thing about Russian constructivist theater is that the stage becomes non-existent. The stage is just as much of an important part as the actor themselves. And so when I'm thinking about this space about Hall Walls, these kind of odd movable walls that almost feel like they're sculptures already, like you don't even have to do anything to them, as if like the viewer going into the space feels like they should be pushing the wall or they should be kind of going around in like a carousel. There's all these kind of features to me about this space that seems already activated without bringing anything into it. And so all of this was kind of on my mind, specifically this image where almost like a book becomes a stage set. Sorry, this one's pretty blurry, but like kind of framing devices become shapes. They become just as much a part of the piece as the actors do. Specifically, Liszewski had been making these pieces in the 20s, the prune rooms, which he kind of talks about as the interchange station between painting and architecture, where you think about a plane as a wall as a painting, the floor as a painting. You bring in a painting and hang the painting on the wall, and then what's the painting? Is it the viewer walking into the space? Is it the painting on the wall? Is it your friend's painting that you hung next to yours? Is the color you painted the wall? All of these things start to become really interesting to me in thinking about material and form and space, and specifically hall walls as space that just already to me lends itself so much to this kind of transitional space. Also, I've been really into Kay Sage, who I kind of found out about recently, a female surrealist painter that kind of didn't quite get her due in her time. But her paintings, very much paintings, oil on canvas, to me act as these like vacant stage spaces, waiting for the actor to arrive, waiting for the moment to happen. It's a sense of kind of stillness. And the forms, too, are really interesting to me. So all of these things are kind of going on in my head. I'm going to show you a couple images of, this was the piece that John was talking about that he saw at Locust Projects. This was actually the first iteration of it, and there were some sculptures that were placed outside of it. So I've kind of, I started making abstract paintings that were basically based on room interiors, home interiors, couch, rug, wallpaper, and they kind of evolved from there into making still lifes in my studio that I would paint from. So I used to go into people's homes and paint a living room. Then I started kind of constructing the living room in my studio to paint from, get a couch from Goodwill, paint the wallpaper, and then sit down and make a drawing or a painting of that space. The work kind of evolved into getting so obsessed about making that still life that I just kind of stopped making the paintings altogether. And so the work really came out of kind of combining my interest in painting and then also basically constructing these still life spaces that are basically made of home building materials like drywall, wood, linoleums, laminates, countertops, all kinds of stuff. And then this show also was really influential. It was this year, and as you can see, a lot of the forms you'll see upstairs are kind of repeated, and it's basically thinking about the space as I said, as a stage set, but almost in this case, because the space really was quite large, it kind of became a whole landscape in itself. And so for this show, it's a combination, and really with every show, it's a combination of me fabricating objects in the space, and then also a combination of found things. This is like totally fabricated. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about where I'm finding these materials and then kind of how my interest in those materials just kind of started in the first place. This is also a show I had in Miami. Maybe as you can see or not see, there are fragments of hot tubs in the sculpture, as well as laminate countertops, hurricane blinds, laminate, like doctor's office kind of table things. And so a huge part of my practice is going to a place and finding these materials and getting inspired by kind of what is in that place. Also, maybe, as you notice, the work is quite large, and so it's really hard to travel with or ship. And so often kind of how I'm reconciling that is going to a place with very little and kind of making the show on site. So it also involves kind of being in that place for a pretty long period of time. And at first, that kind of was a lot for me to grapple with. And I think over time doing it, I've really embraced it and kind of enjoy being in a place and really getting to know it through the materials that I'm finding. So this is in Miami, finding things. This is here in Buffalo. Maybe some of you guys recognize this place, Buffalo Reuse, which a lot of the materials upstairs came from around Buffalo. And so when I'm out looking for materials, it's this kind of, to me, it's like two things going on. Like the first thing is it's me just being a tourist, just looking at like, what is this place that I'm in? What is this city? What are its buildings? Like, what are its colors? What are its textures? Almost thinking about the city's landscape as painting material or collage material. Like, what are the stuff? What's the stuff of this place? So for instance, like going back to the image from Miami, like the stuff of Miami is really different than the stuff of Buffalo. Everything in Miami was like sun faded. It had been out in the sun. There's this like kind of 80s, is almost kind of like the latest it goes. Buffalo, there's like just such a sense of time here to me. Things just have been around so much longer. They're built to last. There's like not laminates, it's like marble. Like you can't find laminate here. It's like marbles from churches and like marble floors. So you'll see in the show, there's like marble and granite. And so when I'm out looking for these things, first it's really just like surveying the land and trying to understand things. Then it kind of becomes about choosing, thinking kind of through what would maybe make sense with what I already brought. And then there's really this translation process that happens either in the studio or in this case, my studio for the week was here in the gallery. And that translation process is interesting because obviously the material has this embedded history within it, especially some of like things that are coming from Buffalo that have such a history. They carry that with them to the hall walls. All of a sudden, that history in that object is surrounded by all of the things that I've kind of connected it with. And, you know, I change in looking at it. It changes how it kind of appears to me when it's surrounded by the things that I've brought with my history to it. And hopefully I'm kind of keeping some of that history, but I'm also kind of carrying that thing into my world a bit. And it becomes a piece of my painting space or collage space or sculpture space, whatever you want to say. And sometimes things I can't take them with me, like they're in my hotel. So you get inspired by things where you're like, oh, I love, like at the Lenox, my bathtub there. Like I love that there's that little insert, and how can I figure out how to put like inserts or compartments or cabinets into my show. Or like this fake boulder that was like on my street in Brooklyn that was so absurd, probably like left over from a movie shoot or something. I don't even understand how it got there, but just a giant fake boulder. It's totally plastic. And then, you know, other things are really small. You can just put them in your pocket, and often part of my studio practice is like putting things in my pocket on my way to my studio. And it just depends. So it really becomes kind of a combination of like the pocket things, which you'll see a lot of those in the show upstairs, and you'll be able to tell, like, did it fit in Katie's pocket for the last 3 years? Or is it something that she must have had to like haul from down the street in Buffalo, because like there's no way she would have been able to like carry that around for the last few years. And then there's these really particular instances that have happened over the years where you hit a gold mine, where a place is so specific and embedded with so much narrative that it's almost like it is the work itself. Like there's nothing more to do. This like hot tub graveyard site in Pennsylvania is like the work. There's nothing I could do. And I thought about it I've been going to this site for about 8 years now. And it took getting to know this woman, that Amy Bartow, who owns Bartow's Pools and Spas in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and talking about my art practice with her and getting to know her, for then to get access to this site where she puts these old hot tubs. And to me, like, just that is so much part of my work than the sculpture upstairs. It's not, I wouldn't really like claim this as like a photograph or something I'm showing, but just like this is part of the history of me as an artist and what I'm truly interested in. It really gets it a lot. And so hot tubs kind of over the years have become a little bit of an obsession, and trying to figure out how to work with them and try to understand them in a way that maybe I can carry them into my paintings. So I've been going and cutting out sections, which you'll see upstairs. There's some sections of hot tubs if you kind of keep an eye out for them. But there's something to me about the material of a hot tub. It's acrylic, fiberglass, fake granite, marble. There's something really interesting in that. The like elegant curved surface that is supposed to be the contour of your body is really interesting to me. But then, of course, on top of that, they're kind of gross and kind of odd in a way. But I feel like as a kid, I always really thought it was like you made it if you had a hot tub. There was the class thing involved and kind of a money thing to me where I was coming from. And to me, there's a lot of the materials I'm working with, whether it's like fake building materials like laminates and linoleums that are made to look like stone or wood but are plastic, or if it's the actual granite or wood themselves. To me, there's something really interesting conceptually there about kind of the history of that material, and then of course just the material itself, the color, the weight, the shape, in terms of kind of like a painting language. So yeah, here's just to give you some action shots. Sometimes it's hard to kind of visualize what goes on. But so all of these things, all of these hot tub pieces, all the things I showed you are ultimately just ending up at my studio, or for instance, the studio here at Hall Walls for the Week. And as I said, there's this looking process where I'm setting these objects up in the studio. I'm looking at them anew in this kind of white cube-esque context. And I'm like, I'm asking it all these questions, like, who are you? What do you mean? What are you gonna do? And it has all of these things with it, but you can kind of see just the objects when they're put next to other things, they start to read really differently. And so from the objects I'm bringing to my studio, a lot like Sarah, which is crazy, I make models. And the models to me, a lot like Sarah, are almost like three-dimensional drawings. I don't think of it as like a finished object exactly. It's a way for me to kind of extend my sketchbook process in like a physical sense. And so I've made a model for everything I've ever constructed. Sometimes it'll be a sketch before the piece, and then sometimes it'll be one after the fact. So like for the show here, I made a sketch one, and then I'll probably go back to my studio and make one that's almost identical. So for me, that becomes like something I can keep and hold on to, because my work is so, it only really exists when it exists. Like once the pieces are taken apart, it's often that it just won't exist as it does again. And especially you'll see the piece upstairs, when it relies so heavily on the gallery space itself, there's just no way to replicate the piece. So it's nice for me to have, this is like a funny detail of the model. And this weirdly is the actual piece that kind of ended up being a little bit closer to the model than most. But yeah, I thought I would end it there. I feel like that's maybe a lot of information. But I'm excited to talk to you guys maybe in the flesh upstairs. Maybe that makes more sense. If anybody has any questions now that are immediate, but maybe it'd be fun to go upstairs and have a beer and, right? I don't know. Anything? Upstairs? Yeah. Oh, okay.
What do you do with your stuff after the installation is over?
I have most of it, which I know sounds crazy because I live in Brooklyn. My boyfriend and I rent a barn in Pennsylvania. It's a really small barn that we keep stuff that can kind of be like.
I have a really big one.
Yeah.
We'll talk later.
Yeah. So I try to keep as much as I can. There's like clearly things I can't keep, and part of the kind of model making was this wanting to keep it in a way, or to keep the idea in a physical way. And so that's just part of it for me, is like it's really freeing for me to not have to be like, okay, this whole thing has to sit somewhere. It's allowed me to kind of like make the work as big as I want, or be as kind of risky as I want, like paint a wall, or like painting a wall becomes part of the piece, but I don't have to take the wall home with me. Yeah. Cool. Should we go upstairs? Yeah. Yeah? Okay.